Please be seated. Colleagues, staff, and gallery members, I'm pleased today to share with you that for the singing of our national anthem, I am pleased to introduce to you Conor Morand. Conor is an alternative pop artist from London who's been performing music for nearly a decade. He's been featured on a multiple number of TV and radio networks across Canada and has played shows in over 10 countries around the world, including Germany, Italy, Thailand, and Malaysia. While he is no stranger to the international stage, Conor is happy to be back in Canada. We're happy he's here too, where he's currently producing music for his upcoming solo project set to be released in 2020. Please welcome to the front, as I ask you please to stand and join us in our national anthem, Mr. Conor Morand.
O Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all of us commend. With glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true north strong and free. From far and wide, O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God keep our land glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Mr. Conor Morand, ladies and gentlemen. The City of London is committed to making every effort to provide alternate formats and communication supports for council, standing or advisory committee meetings, and information upon request. To make a request for any city service, please contact accessibility@london.ca or 519-661-2489, extension 2425. Colleagues, as required and necessary, the council will break for dinner at approximately 6:30 p.m. I'll look for any disclosures of pecuniary interest. Councillor Lehman.
I will disclose on 9.3, number 11, as I am a member of the LDBA.
So noted. Thank you. Councillor Turner.
With respect to the 22nd meeting of the Strategic Priorities and Policy Committee, the item for the appointment of a board member to the Middlesex London Health Unit, which is item 4.2, I declare a pecuniary interest as I am an employee of the Middlesex London Health Unit.
Thank you. Any other disclosures? Seeing none. We have 3 recognitions tonight. The first, colleagues, as many of you will know, there was an important announcement today. Our friend and colleague John Fleming has indicated he's leaving the city at the end of this year. So let me say, John, on behalf of council and me personally, I wish to recognize and thank you for your many contributions to make our city so much better. We'll have more time before the end of the year to say really nice things about you, John. But given the announcement was today, I thought it was important that we as council, we as staff, recognize you for your tremendous contributions to our city. Thank you so much. Colleagues, we have some special visitors with us this afternoon. Typically, we don't tolerate howling from the gallery. However, on this occasion, we'll make an exception. One of our colleagues around the horseshoe said, does this mean that council is going to the dogs? And I have to tell you, not true at all, but today is a special day for those dogs and their owners. Let me share this with you. We're joined by members of the St. John Ambulance Therapy Dog Program, and 2019 marks the 25th anniversary of this service in London, Middlesex. Since 1994, these volunteers, both the two-legged variety and the four-legged ones, have provided comfort to the sick, to the elderly, and the isolated. In recent years, as mental health awareness has grown, so too has their critically important role been in our community. Last year alone, therapy dog volunteers spent more than 9,000 hours in the community and logged over 3,000 visits. That's an average of almost 9 per day. They spend time in seniors' residences, long-term care facilities and hospitals, as well as Western, Fanshawe, and area high schools. They provide crisis support through Victim Services of Middlesex, London, and the 911 call center, in addition to Ronald McDonald House, CPRI, and the London Public Library's Dog Tales program. As these volunteers will tell you, the true success of this program is best measured not in the hours logged nor the visits made, but rather in the number of smiles received and the number of times their dogs are told, I love you. On behalf of City Council, I want to recognize the St. John Ambulance Therapy Dog Program for providing 25 years of compassion and care. And I should have declared my interest, colleagues. I'm patron of the Order of St. John. I've been in that position for a number of years, and it truly heartens me to see these volunteers, two- and four-legged, here tonight. It truly does matter what they do, and what you do sincerely makes a difference. Thank you for being here this afternoon, and thank you for the good work that you do for our community. I will tell you that we had them all in my little office. I didn't think it was so little until about half an hour ago, and they were all in my office as I had the opportunity to pin one dog, and I was only drooled on twice. So you'll be pleased to know that the carpets are clean and colleagues are welcome back anytime, as you all are as well. So thank you again very much. The third recognition that we have, I'll ask Councillor Lewis to make the announcement.
Thank you, Your Worship. Colleagues, 2019 will mark, sadly, the 30th anniversary of the École Polytechnique massacre in Montreal. And in 1991, in response to that, some men and boys came together in Toronto to say that they had a role to play in speaking out against ending violence against women and girls. This pin that I'm wearing today was given to me in 2006 by somebody who was a political hero and mentor and also a friend, and that's the late Honorable Jack Layton, who was one of the founding members of the White Ribbon movement. So today we are all wearing our white ribbons to speak out to end male violence against women and girls, and to show our support for what is the largest movement by men and boys across the globe to end violence against women. Yesterday, we launched the White Ribbon campaign here at City Hall with thanks to staff members Miriam and Jillian, who organized an event where we were able to take the pledge and put on our white ribbons that you can see everyone wearing today. If you haven't had a chance to do that, I do encourage you to find Jillian or Miriam and take that pledge and join us in taking another step towards a society where we no longer have to wear these ribbons because women and girls are safe, equal, and equitable members of our society.
Thank you, Councillor Lewis. There are no confidential matters to be considered in public, so I'll look for a motion to go into closed session. Moved by Councillor Hopkins, seconded by Councillor Hillier. I'll turn your attention to the screen.
Your worship, there's one added reason as a result of yesterday's Corporate Service Committee meeting, which is a matter pertaining to proposed or pending acquisition of land by the municipality, including communications necessary for that purpose, advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, commercial and financial information that belongs to the municipality and has monetary value or potential value as a position plan procedure, criteria or instruction to be applied to any negotiations carried on or to be carried on or on behalf of the municipality.
Thank you, Clerk. I'll advise council that in addition to this, we have 13 items that are listed on the council agenda for closed session as we vote.
Closing the vote, and the motion carries 13-0.
Thank you. We'll meet in Committee Room 3. We are recessed to that point. Please be seated. We have the minutes from the meeting held on November 12th put on the floor. I'll look for a mover. Councillor Solis, seconded by Councillor Van Meerbergen. Any comments, discussion? Then I'll turn your attention to the screen as we vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 13-0.
Thank you. Under communications and petitions, we have two communications on the added agenda related to item 11.5.1 of the 20th report of the Planning and Environment Committee regarding the 11th report of the London Advisory Committee on Heritage. I'll look for a mover and seconder. Moved by Councillor Pelosi, seconded by Councillor Hillier. We'll call the question.
Councillor Hopkins. Closing the vote, the motion carries 13-0.
There are no motions to which notice is given, so I'll turn our attention to the reports, 8.1. Deputy Mayor Helmer, can I call on you to provide the 22nd report of the Corporate Services Committee, please?
I'm happy to do so. Colleagues will see that we covered a number of items. It was a relatively brief meeting. Unfortunately, Councillor Morgan is away at FCM right now, and Councillor Kaibag, as you know, is ill. So I'm happy to present the report. I'll move them all together.
Does anyone wish any of these items dealt with for separate consideration? Seeing none, I'll turn your attention to the screen. Oh, pardon me, I'll look for comments. You certainly may. Pardon me.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and through you. I just wanted to briefly make sure that I understood the process that we're going to have for the new city manager. And I know a committee's been formed. Is my understanding correct that this committee will be meeting, carrying on its business? Councillors who are not on the committee will be welcome to attend. However, the actual voting of that committee will be done only by committee members. I just want to be clear of that.
Let's get right to the clerk on the question.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, other members of council are allowed to be in attendance, my understanding, but they wouldn't be voting.
Councillor Squire?
Just a follow-up, and just then, as I understand it, once any kind of recommendation is made by that committee, then councillors will have a chance to vote on the particular recommendation, whatever it may be.
Clerk?
Through your worship, yes, the recommendations from that committee are brought forward through the Corporate Services Committee.
Councillor?
Just so I'm clear then, as a councillor who's not a member of the Corporate Services Committee, the committee itself can make decisions and recommendations. The Civic Works Committee can then vote on that and come to a conclusion. And as a councillor who's not on either of those committees, I won't have a chance to make a vote until it actually comes to council in the whole.
Clerk?
Through you, your worship, that's correct unless council decides to take some other process other than terms of reference was created and debated in public session, and I'm just basing my answers based on the terms of reference that were approved by council.
Councillor Squire?
And through you, just to conclude, I understand from reading that today that's the process. I'm not sure that I understood that completely by reading the terms of reference. I may have been wrong. It's not necessarily a process that I'm completely comfortable with, and I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions with respect to the 22nd report of the Corporate Services Committee? Seeing none, we'll call the question.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 13-0.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. The 15th report of Civic Works, Councillor Squire.
Mr. Chair, I haven't heard from any councillors with regard to pulling anything, so I'm prepared to move the entire report.
Anyone wish any of these items dealt with separately? Any comments or questions? Then we'll call the question.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 13-0.
Thank you very much. The 20th report of the Planning and Environment, Councillor Hopkins.
Yes, Your Worship, I'd like to put the 20th Planning and Environment Committee report on the floor. I have not heard from any of my colleagues wishing to have any items pulled, so I will put all the items on the floor. And just to let my colleagues know, as always, planning is a busy meeting with a number of public participation meetings that were held. The draft Affordable Housing Community Improvement Plan was presented, and it is going to be going out for public participation sometime in January 2020. So with that, I would like to put all the other items on the floor.
Thank you. Does anyone wish any of these dealt with separately? Any comments or questions? Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you, I want to thank the members of the Planning Committee, particularly for the work that they've done on item 5, that was 3.1 on the agenda, the farm gate sales on lands within the urban growth boundary. I think this is a really important step forward in food security and the urban agricultural strategy the council has been working on for years, prior councils before this one. In particular, the farm gate sales that have been conducted by Urban Roots on 21 Norland Ave, which is my colleague Councillor Van Holst's ward, but is one that I have been pleased to volunteer at and occasionally purchase fresh produce from, is very much in an area of the city that's in a, well, for lack of a better term, a food desert. And having that farm gate sale there makes it much easier for people to afford low-cost produce. And that's an excellent model where we have a one-third share, with one-third being sold to businesses in the community who are in the food industry, one-third being made available to community programs like the food cupboard at the Crouch Neighborhood Resource Center, and then one-third available for sale at farm gates. And this is a model that is going to go a long way, I think, to helping address issues of food security in our community. And I also think that while I understand that there were some members who had some concerns. I'm not at all worried that, I myself grow way more tomatoes and kale in my backyard than I could ever possibly eat, and I'm happy to give them away to folks who need them. But I don't think that somebody in that position having a little food stand on their property is going to put any businesses at risk. And certainly I don't see anyone going to run out to a grocery store and then bring that produce back and sell it below cost that they paid for it, to sell it in their driveway. So I think that this is just another opportunity, and it's a step towards common sense approaches to food security. So I really appreciate the debate the committee had, all the work that's gone into this, and I hope that colleagues will overwhelmingly support it and come on out to one of the urban farms that we have and enjoy some of that fresh local produce.
Thank you, Councillor Cassidy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I know you said at the beginning that we'll have a future opportunity to say great things about John Fleming, but I want to talk about item 10 on the planning report and the community improvement plan for affordable housing, which is just one, you know, really great thing that John Fleming worked on. He's going to go out with a bang. And I just want to point out that this was a really, really good comprehensive report. And just like the community environmental action plan that came last night, we see how all of these reports that are coming forward, these big ones like this, how interrelated they are. So a lot of the things in the action plan last night touched on a lot of the things that are also in this CIP, the draft CIP for affordable housing, and also the core area action plan, and also hopefully future draft bylaw coming forward about vacant properties. That's all related as well. So we're seeing some of the really big issues that we're facing here in the city, and probably the biggest one is the dire need that we're facing for affordable and geared to income housing and social housing. All of these things are related, and we're the only way we're going to really make a serious dent in some of these challenges is by approaching it that way, in that holistic way, and tackling them all at the same time rather than trying to, you know, go one at a time or over here or over there. It has to all happen together. So this is a really great report. Among the many wonderful, innovative, groundbreaking things that John Fleming has worked on in the time that I've been on council. So through you to John and his staff and to the other members of SLT who have been involved in a lot of these things as well. Thank you so much. This is a good way to leave the city, but I still don't want you to leave, so thank you.
He still has 5 weeks. We're not letting him off the hook yet. Any other comments or questions? Then colleagues, we'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, and the motion carries 13-0.
Your worship, if you would allow me, this is my last time chairing the planning committee, and I would like just to say a few things. And importantly, I want to give my colleagues a bit of an update. Besides all the planning applications that we've had to do the past year, I want to touch upon just a few topics that we dealt with at planning committee this year. Affordable Housing Development Planning Toolkit update. Upper Thames Dingman Creek mapping updates, bird-friendly development, new tree protection bylaw, master plan concepts for Lambeth Main Street and Hamilton Road, CIP for Lambeth, and new measures for CIPs. Study requests for Argyle, Hyde Park regeneration investigation, Heritage Register changes, ARVA sanitary servicing updates, rethink zoning terms of reference, provincial proposals to changes with Bill 108, and of course the provincial policy statement. I want to just say a few things too as we move forward in my ward. We've got a number of subdivisions like West 5 and Riverbend and Silverleaf that continue, and Bostwick. We also have a number of secondary plans like the Victoria Park secondary plan, the Masonville updates, and of course we heard here tonight about the Affordable Housing Community Improvement Plan. All those things are going to be going forward. I really want to thank the committee. It's been a privilege working with you. I want to thank staff. I want to thank city clerks as well. I've enjoyed every minute. Moving on, I want to say a few things, and I am going to do my very best not to cry. But I want to start with the comments from our mayor last night at SPPC when we were talking about the climate change strategy. And the words stuck with me when he said, "We will be remembered by what we do." One of the things I want to personally, working on the planning committee, I hope we as a council will be remembered for the climate change that I hope will go forward, and also for finalizing the London plan. Those are things that I truly want to be remembered for this council. I personally want to thank Mr. Fleming. I've known Mr. Fleming for 20 years, thereabouts, and respected him and still continue to respect him. I know that the services, what you have given us as a city, I don't think any words would be enough to thank you for that. You truly will be missed. I'm still devastated that you are leaving. I know I will get over it, but I thank you for everything.
Thank you, Councillor Hopkins. We now have the fifth report of the Audit Committee. Deputy Mayor Helmer, please.
Thank you. I'll put the entire report on the floor. As you'll see, it's mostly internal audit-related matters. We did have a good discussion about some of the observations that came forward from the internal auditors.
Thank you. Any comments or questions with respect to the Audit Committee? Seeing none, I'll call the question.
Closing the vote, and the motion carries 13-0.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. We have added reports. We have the 21st report of council in closed session. May I call on Councillor Hilliard, please?
Thank you. It's quite long. You might want to update your social media. 21st report of council in closed session. Your council in closed session reports that on the recommendation of the Managing Director, Corporate Services and City Treasurer, Chief Financial Officer, with concurrence of the Managing Director, Environmental and Engineering Services, and City Engineer, the Director, Rapid Transit, on the advice of the Manager of Realty Services with respect to the property located at 273 Wellington Road, further described as Part Lot 132, Plan 452, 4th, as in YB4 1081, as in PIN 0836400166, containing an area of approximately 4,800 square feet, as shown in the location map, for the purpose of future road accommodations to accommodate the Wellington Gateway project. The following actions be taken. An offer submitted by Sherry Jacqueline Bettridge to sell the subject property to the city for the sum of $300,000 be accepted. That, on the recommendation of the Managing Director, Corporate Services and City Treasurer, Chief Financial Officer, with the concurrence of the Director, Roads and Transportation, Managing Director, Transportation Planning and Design, on the advice of the Manager of Realty Services with respect to the property located at 620 Adelaide Street North, further described as Part Block B, south side of Salisbury Street, Plan 386, third, being part of PIN 08279-0186 LT, as shown on location map, for the purpose of future road improvement to accommodate the Adelaide Street CP Rail separation project. The following actions be taken. The offer agreement of purchase and sale submitted by Canada Pacific Railway Company that sell the portion of subject property designated Part 1 Plan 33R20258, the property to the city for the sum of $62,667 be accepted. That, on the recommendation of the Managing Director, Corporate Services and City Treasurer, Chief Financial Officer, and with the concurrence of the Director, Roads and Transportation Division Manager, Transportation Planning and Design, on the advice of the Manager of Realty Services with respect to the property located at 2535 Hyde Park Road, described as part of Lot 24, Concession 6, being part of PIN 08-138-0057 LT, further described as Part 4, Plan 33R20415, as shown in the location map for the purpose of future road improvement to accommodate Sunningdale Road, West Hyde Park Road roundabout. The following actions be taken. The offer submitted by, Jawad Akhtar and Amir Akhtar to sell the portion of the subject property to the city for the sum of $190,000. That on the recommendation of the Managing Director, Corporate Services and City Treasurer, Chief Financial Officer, with the concurrence of the Director, Roads and Transportation and Division Manager, Transportation Planning and Design, on the advice of the Manager of Realty Services with respect to the portion of the property municipally known as 2545 Hyde Park Road, described as part of Lot 24, Concession 6, being the whole part of PIN 08-138-0056 LT, further described as Part 5, Plan 33R 20415, as shown in the location map for the purpose of future road improvement to accommodate Sunningdale Road West Hyde Park Road roundabout with the following actions. The offer submitted by Jason Stephen Denda and Bridget Marie Mercer to sell a portion of the subject property to the city for the sum of $154,900 be accepted. The city agreeing to pay a further sum of $100 for the grant of temporary easement to and consent to enter agreement. That on the recommendation of the Managing Director, Corporate Services and City Treasurer, Chief Financial, with the concurrence of the Division Manager, Transportation Planning and Design and Director, Roads and Transportation, on the advice of the Manager of Realty Services, with respect to the property located at 1588 Clark Road, further described as part of Lot 4, Concession 3, designed as Part 2, Reference Plan 33R20347, being part of PIN 08-147-0159 and part of Lot 4, Concession 3, designated as Parts 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, Plan 33R20347, being part of PIN 08147-0160, both in the geographic township of London, now in the City of London, as shown in the location map. The following actions be taken. The offer submitted by Hydro One Networks Incorporated under the name Her Majesty the Queen in Right of Ontario, as represented by the Ministry of Government and Consumer Services, to sell the subject property to the city, be accepted for the sum of $185,200. That on the recommendation of the Acting Director, Human Resources, the memorandum of agreement concerning the 2020 to 2023 collective agreement for the London Civic Employees, Local Union 107, chartered by the Canadian Union of Public Employees, and affiliated with the Canadian Labour Council representing the outside workers, be ratified. That on the recommendation of the Managing Director, Corporate Services and City Treasurer, Chief Financial Officer, with the concurrence of the Managing Director, Housing and Social Services in Dearness Home, on the advice of the Manager of Realty Service with respect to the property located at 345 Sylvan Street, further described as Blocks A and B, Part 816, Part Lots 4, 5, and 13, Plan 816, parts of Lot 7, 8, and 10, Plan 328, as in an instrument number 710563, subject to instrument number 710563, subject to instrument number 88083, in the City of London, County of Middlesex, further described as PIN 08-363-0084 LT, containing an approximate area of approximately 1.44 acres. As shown in the location map attached to the purpose of stabilizing space, the following actions be taken. An offer submitted by Ways Mental Health Support Service, to sell the subject property to the city for the sum of $1,050,000 be accepted. The city or an agent of the city shall be entitled to enter and inspect the property, including all dwellings and buildings, prior to the closing of this agreement. And that is all.
Thank you. Before we look for discussion, Councillor Hopkins?
Yes, Your Worship, I would like to recuse myself on the 22nd corporate report 6.6, as my son is employed by the City of London and is a member of Union 107.
Thank you. We are also going to call separately item 1, the property acquisition of 273 Wellington Road. Any other items to be pulled for separate consideration? We are pulling that, and of course, item 6, as Councillor Hopkins has requested, the QP 107 agreement. Any other discussion? So let's deal then with item 1. This has been moved by Councillor Hillier. Is there a seconder? This is for item 1. Deputy Mayor Helmer. Comments or questions? Then we call the vote.
Councillor Squire? Closing the vote and the motion carries 12-1.
We'll put on the floor items 2 through 5 and item 7. Is there a mover? Deputy Mayor Helmer, seconded by Councillor Van Holst. Comments or questions? Call the question.
Closing the vote and the motion carries 13-0.
Thank you, colleagues. We'll put on the floor item 6, QP 107 agreement. Is there a mover? Deputy Mayor Helmer, seconded by Councillor Van Holst. Any discussion? We'll call the question.
Closing the vote and the motion carries 12 with 1 recuse.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor Hillier. I'll call on Deputy Mayor Helmer for the 23rd meeting of the Corporate Services Committee, please. That was the meeting held on November 25th.
I'll put this one on the floor. We only had one item on the agenda, and it was a closed session item.
Any comments or questions? Seeing none, we'll call the vote.
Closing the vote and the motion carries 13-0.
And Deputy Mayor Helmer, since you're still standing, why don't we ask you to deal with the 22nd meeting of the Strategic Priorities and Policy Committee, please?
I will try my best. I think we can do everything except for 2.2. We had a split vote on Clause B there, so I imagine it wants to be pulled separately. 4.1, Councillor Squire has asked that to be pulled. 4.2, Councillor Turner has a pecuniary interest. 4.5, Councillor Lehman has a pecuniary interest. And 4.6, also Councillor Squire asked for that to be pulled. So everything else, I'll move that.
Thank you very much. Any comments or questions with respect to those items with the exclusion of 2.2, 4.1, 4.2, and 4.5, and 4.6? Seeing none, we'll call the question.
That looks to me like the whole report.
Through the chair, I wasn't able to amend the wording of the motion, but when the vote is closed, you will see which ones are highlighted, and it will exclude item 5, 2.2, item 7, 4.1, item 8, 4.2, item 11, 4.5, and item 12, 4.6.
So if that's clear, the vote is on the floor.
Would you kindly repeat those numbers?
Clerk?
This excludes item 5, 2.2, item 7, 4.1, item 8, 4.2, item 11, 4.5, and item 12, 4.6.
Councillor Turner, Councillor Hopkins, Councillor Van Meerbergen. Closing the vote, and the motion carries 13-0.
Deputy Mayor.
I'll put item 2.2, which was the London Community Grants Program Allocations Report, on the floor, but just clause A, which I believe was unanimous, and then someone else should probably put B on since I did not support that.
So that means we'll be splitting that then. So A is on the table. Comments or discussions, and we'll deal with B separately. Seeing none, we'll call the question. This is on 2.2A.
Councillor Lehman. Closing the vote, and the motion carries 13-0.
2.2B, Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I'll put 2.2B on the floor. That was my motion, of which we approved only the first clause, which was to ask staff to review whether or not the municipality was the appropriate level of government for some of these grant allocations to come from, with regard to the discussion we had last night, and with the comment from staff, which I'm sure that Ms. Smith can reiterate, that some federal funding programs have not been considered in terms of whether or not grant allocations are appropriately coming to the municipality.
Thank you. Any other further comments or discussion? Then we'll call the question.
Closing the vote, and the motion carries 9-4.
Deputy Mayor Helmer.
Okay, I'll put item 4.1 on the floor. This was pulled by Councillor Squire. This is the climate emergency update report.
Any discussion? All right. Deputy, do you want to speak to him? Councillor Squire.
Mr. Chair. I just wanted to speak to this matter. When this originally came to council, I'm really going to say the same thing. just so everybody's clear, that there's a climate emergency. There's no question about it. It affects not huge parts of the world, it affects everybody in the world, and I'm fully aware of that. I just don't agree that this is the most effective approach for the City of London to undertake to deal with this particular issue. But one of the things I've learned through this process, which has been really comforting to me, is the number of things the City of London does presently of its own initiative to reduce climate change. And that, to me, has made me feel really good about the process, and I'm glad it's a process that we went through. When I was in the United States on the weekend, it was really interesting to watch the annual Harvard-Yale football game and watch all the fans at halftime charge the field and stay on the field for an hour. And I actually felt very good about that. I'm thinking, you know, this is a country, the United States of America, that really needs to wake up in terms of this crisis. So I was really sort of glad to see that happen. So although I agree with the goals, I agree with the needs, this is just, since I said that I wouldn't support it before, my mind has not been changed to say that I would support what we are doing here. That being said, there's a lot of good work being done. I appreciate the people who are here in the gallery today and the passion, and I hope that continues.
Thank you. Councillor Van Holst.
Oh, thank you, Your Worship. And I want to tell you, I'm thrilled to be part of a representative democracy. And I know that many people want even now a proportional government where more views get to be represented. And I'm happy tonight to be representing the views of the thousands of Londoners who don't believe that carbon dioxide is the driver of the natural changes we're seeing in climate. I know for sure that I'm representing Londoners because they've contacted me and thanked me. And I know for sure that others of you are representing Londoners too, because they've contacted me and asked me to resign in very unfriendly terms, although I hope you don't represent them in all their views. One prominent Londoner said to me, you know, I think you're absolutely right, but I won't say that in public. And that's too bad, because they know that the narrative of the climate disaster contains reasons to criticize people who don't agree, and also encourages them to do so. Another person wrote to me and said, I have a significant background in climatology. I possess 2 degrees in physical geography with a focus on Arctic climatology and permafrost. I spent time working with the Canadian Climate Centre in Downsview and have written and published a number of scientific articles for both Canadian and internationally recognized journals. You are correct in your statements that there is no such thing as a climate crisis. In fact, there's no substantial evidence that humans are able to affect climate at all. Climate is driven purely by the Milankovitch cycles and not anthropogenic influences. If the debate is about a clean environment, it is entirely a different discussion, and there's always room for improvement. But unfortunately, the climate alarmists have hijacked that debate. So there's a Londoner, and I offer this as some evidence that the consensus may not be as strong as people would think. More evidence for that. I printed out the 31,000 names of U.S. science people holding a U.S. science degree and 9,000 PhDs who have signed this petition and put it in an envelope and put a stamp on it and sent it in. That basically says the same thing, is that the CO2 is not driving that. However, as we saw yesterday, this could just be laughed off. I remember when I was a co-op student in 3rd year working for Dow Chemical, I'd invented an unintuitive chemical process for revitalizing damaged ion exchange resin, and I sent the tests away to have that confirmed. But when I had described it to my colleagues, they just laughed in my face. What, you're just a student, what do you know? Ha, ha, ha. And there's really nothing left to do at that point than just wait for the new data to come in. And it did, and they said, well, drop everything you're working on. Let's get this patented before you have to go back to school. But so I guess there's the position I'm in. I want to say that I don't need this. The climate emergency narrative to be false. I just think that it is looking at the science the way I have. I know there are people that need it to be true. There's some people that require this as a political tool. Some people need this to be true in order to continue getting research funding. But for me, it's really like saying the apple looks bigger than the grape. And so with that, I'll thank you. I'm going to vote against this. My goal tonight is simply to make sure that the people who don't agree have representation, and this motion is not a unanimous one. So I'm not asking anybody to change their vote. I don't think anyone else needs to get offensive phone calls, but and I'd also like, some people to be able to reconsider some of these elements if it turns out that they're not as excellent as I hope that staff will deliver for us. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Van Meerbergen.
Thank you, Mayor. When you boil it all away, my concern with how we're approaching this is that we may very well inadvertently affect our future growth. We have to remind ourselves we're looking at this from a 30-year perspective. It's the transportation, particularly the transportation elements that I see in this plan over the next 30 years, that not only will hamper our ability to move around the city, but hamper our ability to develop economically and therefore produce a flourishing city. And by that I mean things like what we see in the report in C1, where it talks about reviewing major city projects such as road widenings. We could very well see ourselves in a situation where we already suffer from a very constipated road system, a very constricted road system, which will be made even worse when we try to invoke these types of realities onto this particular problem. And so this is a real concern for me, and I would suggest it's a concern for a lot of Londoners who know when they try to make their way around our city through our road, particularly through our road network, how challenging and difficult it is, and they certainly don't want to see it be made worse in the name of climate change. We only have to look at what's happening. We see already these jam-ups of cars on various roads. And if we make that worse, that only makes the problem of greenhouse gas emissions even worse. We only have to look at how the car is developing in our society, the technology behind it, the fact that the electric cars are getting better, they're getting cheaper, and very soon you're going to see more and more of them on the road, and it'll get to the point within our 30-year span where they're going to be the norm. So we will have vehicles emitting zero in terms of GHG emissions. So for all of these reasons, some of these sections in this report touch on what I've just talked about in terms of our transportation and future growth abilities. So as I did last night, from the 25 subsections in this particular motion, I'd like to pull some of them separately, which I cannot support. So I can support some, but not all. So if we look at last night's report that's come out, on page 9, you can see the list of the various subsections within there. So if I could call those separately, I'd certainly appreciate that. As a package is fine.
As one vote, could you identify those again, Councillor?
Writing on the report.
All right, so we have here parts, let me just get this correct, parts A6,
A6,
B2, B3, B4, B5, C1, C2, C5, and D.
yes, thank you.
D1, thank you very much, and doing that as a group. So let's, why don't we call that right now, and then we'll call the balance of that separately. So we'll put that, as soon as the clerk is ready to assemble that, then we will vote on those items as pulled by Councillor Van Meerbergen. Councillor Turner?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just to the point Councillor Van Meerbergen raised. In the community energy inventory and the greenhouse gas inventory for 2018, about 1 million tons of carbon dioxide are produced by personal vehicles of the 32 million tons, of the 3.2 million tons of carbon dioxide produced in London each year. Personal vehicles represent the largest constituent group of contributors to greenhouse gases. The average lifespan of a vehicle is 8 years. And so any vehicle purchased right now, where the amount of vehicles that are on the road that are electric is very small. It will grow, I agree with that, but also powering those vehicles and fueling them up with energy requires some production of electricity as well. Not all energy production in Canada and Ontario, I think our energy mix is about 85% renewable and about 15% is from carbon production. So with all of that, I think those components that Councillor Van Meerbergen pulled are still very important to the strategy, and I'd encourage my colleagues to go along with it. In terms of our impact as a community, about 1,200 communities have signed on to declare climate emergencies, representing over 300 million people, and that's representative of a population about the size of the United States. So never underestimate the power of a community and what we can do on our own, because together we've got considerable strength.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions from colleagues we've not heard from as we've separated the vote? These are the items as referred by Councillor Van Meerbergen. Are we set, clear? Let's do this then. All those to vote. We'll call the vote now.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 10-3.
So colleagues, now let's go to the balance of B, and we'll have the clerk have that set up, and we'll proceed accordingly.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 11-2.
Deputy Mayor Helmer.
Thank you. That brings us to 4.2, which Councillor Turner has declared a pecuniary interest on, and Councillor Van Holst has actually offered to move this one.
Yeah, if you would allow me, Your Worship, to move this item.
So noted. Thank you very much. Any discussion?
I'll just thank Councillor Kaibaga for being willing to serve on the Health Unit.
And thank you, if I might say, for putting your name forward as well. We'll call the question.
Closing the vote, and the motion carries 12 with 1 recuse.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Helmer.
I will put item 4.5. These are the appointments to the London Downtown Business Association. Councillor Lehman has declared a pecuniary interest on this one.
Any discussion? Then we'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, and the motion carries 12 with 1 recuse.
Deputy Mayor.
I will put item 4.6 on the floor. This is the West Transit motion that was brought forward by Councillors Hopkins and Lehman and Morgan. Councillor Squire asked for this to be pulled.
Councillor Squire.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I have had a while to think about this. I spent the ride home from Chicago thinking about this, and unfortunately, it's not something that I can support, but I want to make it clear why I'm not, because I think it's very important in the context we're moving into budget. This motion contains at least two aspects that are highly operational in nature. Asking staff of the city to review options for higher order transit serving West London, including extension of service further west and local service integration opportunities. I want to make it clear, those are operational service matters which in my view come within the purview of the London Transit Commission. And I had the opportunity to speak to the London Transit Commission because I called them today and I said, what do you have to say about this? What information can you give me about this? And they said nothing, nothing. You know, we were invited to a couple of very early meetings, but none of this was discussed, and we know nothing other than that. And I felt that at this point in time, I've got to say, look, at this point in time, we operate with a very clear system. We have the London Transit Commission that's responsible for the operation and the costs of transit, employing ridership income, gas tax, and a sizable contribution from the City of London. But until and at such time as that changes, that is their responsibility. When I hear that they haven't been consulted on something coming forward that is this large, in my view, we're talking about an extension of transit to a great extent, it raises concerns. And the reason it really raises concerns now is tomorrow as a commissioner of the LTC, I'm going to be going to a meeting, and some of you should pull up the report on the budget situation at London Transit. It's nothing short of dire, quite frankly. In my view. And without some budget relief or some budget help, we're going to be in a very difficult situation. And my difficulty is we're bringing forward things as we move along that are going to add to that situation without even having the input of the authority that is tasked with doing it. And it's getting to the point, and I know this at London Transit, where the complaints start coming in. Why haven't you done industrial service? Why isn't my bus on time? Why haven't you given service to my street? Why haven't you done this? And I'm here to say to you that service costs money. If you add routes, if you add buses, employees, industrial service, all of those things are going to cost money and affect the budget. The other thing is, and I'm quite surprised at this, that there's any shock at all that there's an increased ask from London Transit coming to City Council. I know when we went through the bus rapid transit debate, I pointed out over and over and over again in the rapid transit implementation reports that the city would have to start making, as of 1919 and moving on, substantial contributions to transit. And when we do things like this and we don't consult with transit and we expect them to deliver the service, it's not something that I can support. Ultimately, I'm hoping there'll be something in West London that'll be manageable, but I would suggest that the appropriate course of action for council is to do what we did prior, look at infrastructure projects that are going to help transit that we can fund through federal and provincial money that we're receiving. We've already done that in that area. The intersection at the corner of Oxford and Warncliffe is going to be fixed up so transit will run better. Certainly in the area of the north, I'd love to see the intersection at the intersection of Western Road and Sarnia Road fixed up. These are infrastructure projects that the city can meaningfully do without impacting the operational effectiveness of London Transit. The other thing is I have a great amount of sympathy for people who supported the BRT route in West London because I knew the costs. I mean, I knew the operating costs because London Transit had been consulted and I fully knew what they were and the vote was taken. This, I have very little knowledge about what this is going to come back. And I understand this is just a report. I get that, and it's going to be coming back. But really, it's impossible for me as a member of London Transit for the next 3 years to continue to support motions and reports that have not had meaningful input from London Transit. So going forward, I know this is, and I believe this was discussed last night, I wasn't here, that other projects can come forward. And I think that's obvious. I mean, I expected there would be a process whereby we would be able to submit additional projects for federal and provincial funding. That's what we did last time. But that being said, they were almost all infrastructure projects, except for the BRT projects where we'd actually had the operational costs. So this has given me a wonderful opportunity to stand up today and express my concerns. Because I can tell you, when I talked to London Transit and I talked to their administration, you know what they said to me? They said, how do we communicate with council? Do you have any tips, Phil, about how we can get our message to council as to what a difficult circumstance we're in and how difficult it is when you talk about operational matters?
Councillor
without
Squire, do you
consulting?
need another moment to finish your thoughts? Because
Well, I wasn't here last night. If council is happy to do that, it's not going to take very long.
Councillor Hopkins, just bear with me. You've asked council a question. Councillor Hopkins, did you want to add to that? Or were you looking to make your own comments? Sorry, when you're ready, if you wish to be recognized separately, I will.
Sorry.
If I may, I thought you were asking for an extension for Councillor Squire to continue. I misunderstood your question.
You're moving a motion to extend his comments?
Yes.
Seconded by? Lots. Councillor Lewis? I think that's, let's just do a hand vote on this if we can. All those in favor? Carry on, Councillor Squire.
So thank you very much, my colleagues. I do appreciate that. I don't go often, very often. So I understand this is going to pass. I understand why it's going to pass. I get all that. But I said that I would raise these issues today because I think they are important ones, and it leads me not to support this. And what I am hoping is that as this ask moves forward, there's some serious and detailed discussions with London Transit as to what these things are and how they are going to be funded. So that's where I want to leave it. I wanted to raise that concern and indicate why I'm not supporting. Sometimes when I say I'm not supporting something, people think I'm against transit or something like that. I'm very much in favor of transit. I've been on London Transit for 5 years, so I'm going to leave it at that.
Councillor Van Holst.
Thank you, Your Worship. Because there's suggestions that we're going to be expanding the scope of the work in with the BRT, I've got some questions that would need to be addressed in a confidential session. I'm not necessarily asking to do that now, I think, but I'm going to write those, and maybe we can deal with that at the next nearest opportunity.
Thank you very much. Any other comments? Councillor Lehman.
Well, I thank Councillor Squire for those comments, and I guess to address those concerns, this is a report to see what could be done with the existing funding still available, and I look forward, I think my colleagues do, is to seeing what business cases accompany anything that should be recommended, and that would of course involve cost-benefit analysis of any increased LTC services at that time, and of course that would involve discussions with LTC. So it's just not a carte blanche. We're going to jam it in because we have some money and forget all increased costs associated with that. I'm not going to be in favor of anything just because it comes forward from this. I will be analyzing this, as will all the other councillors, with an eye to getting value for our dollar, and with, of course, the budget concerns with LTC.
Any other comments? Deputy Mayor Helmer.
Well, I'd like to suggest an amendment. I heard what Councillor Squire said. I think it is important that we do consult with London Transit Commission, and so perhaps we can just add another clause that says civic administration be directed to consult with the London Transit Commission on the matters identified in the first part. Because I think that's the intention of the people who brought it forward. I think it might have just been poorly worded, and I think this is the start of a process rather than the end. So I would suggest that maybe as a way to resolve that particular concern. I don't know if there's a seconder for that amendment. I sent some language to the clerk. I'm trying to refer to all the other clauses in that motion.
All right, well then let's take a look at that wording then. Is there a seconder? Councillor Hopkins? Before we open it up for any other discussion, I want to see I think we need to see what that wording says. So we have a mover and seconder on the amendment. Any comments or questions with respect to that hasn't been dealt with? Seeing no questions, we'll call the question on the amendment.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 13-0.
So Councillor, will you move the amended motion? Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Hopkins. Any new comments? Councillor Hopkins.
Yes, Your Worship, I guess this is the time where I can make some comments then, and happy to support the amendment moving forward with conversations. I understand that's okay with staff. It seems that the more conversations, the more we try to understand, having little knowledge on anything that relates to how we move forward with transit projects is a concern. This is a request for a report back. I'm hoping my colleagues can support that. We're going to probably not have everything that we want here, but the opportunity exists to improve the way we move out in the West End. We know it is about development, especially in my ward. It's only going to get worse. We need options. I hear from residents that we need to be able to move around the west part of the city. We should not be forgotten as we debate and introduce transit. So I'm hoping my colleagues can support this. I know this is not the last of the conversation that we're going to have, and look forward to the report back.
Any other discussion? I see none. I'll call the question.
Councillor Squire. Closing the vote and the motion carries 12-1.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Helmer. You've had a busy standing meeting today. There are no deferred matters, nor inquiries of which I'm aware, nor emergent motions. So let's turn our attention to the bylaws. We're going to call Bills 437 through 448 and added Bills 449 through 456, with the exception of Bill 451, requested by Councillor Van Meerbergen to be pulled. So, for first reading, I'll look for a mover and seconder for introduction. And first reading of those bills, is there a mover? Councillor Van Meerbergen, seconded by Councillor Lehman. We call the vote.
Closing the vote and the motion carries 13-0.
Colleagues, we have now second reading of bills 437 through 448 and added bills 449 through 456, with the exception of bill 451. I will look for a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Cassidy, seconded by Councillor Lewis. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the vote.
Councillor Squire. Closing the vote and the motion carries 13-0.
Thank you, and I'll look for a mover and seconder, third reading and enactment of bills 437 through 448 inclusive, and added bills 449 through 456 inclusive, with the exception of bill 451. Is there a mover? Councillor Pelosi, seconded by Councillor Hillier. I call the vote.
Closing the vote, and the motion carries 13-0.
Colleagues, I'll put your attention to Bill 451, first reading. I'll look for a mover and seconder of the introduction and first reading of 451. Is there a mover? Councillor Lehman, seconded by Councillor Pelosi. I'll call the vote.
Councillor Squire. Closing the vote, and the motion carries 12-1.
For Bill 451, second reading, I'll look for a mover and seconder. Moved by Councillor Hopkins, seconded by Councillor Cassidy. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, and the motion carries 12-1.
Finally, I'll look for a mover and seconder of third reading and enactment of Bill 451. Moved by Councillor Cassidy, seconded by Councillor Hillier. I'll turn your attention to the screen and call the vote.
Closing the vote, and the motion carries 12-1.
Colleagues, before we adjourn, this is our regular opportunity, but no less sincere, to thank all our staff. It's been a busy couple of weeks since our last council meeting and all the work that you've done. We appreciate it. We've said some nice things about Mr. Fleming. I'm sure that's not quite done yet, so we'll say some more later. But thank you to all of our staff and to the staff in your departments. We appreciate the work you've done. And finally, can I also thank our outgoing chairs, Anna Hopkins, Maureen Cassidy, Phil Squire, Josh Morgan, for the great work that they have done in chairing their various committees. We appreciate it very much. And Deputy Mayor Helmer for consistently doing all of those backup roles with SPPC and chairing those portions in committee. So thank you all, and that's much, much appreciated. I'll look for a mover to adjourn. Councillor Van Meerbergen, seconded by Councillor Squire. Hand vote, all those in favor. That's unanimous. Meeting adjourned. Thank you.